960 years ago, about 8,000 men stepped off their longboats onto this very beach. The date was the 28th of September, 1066. 2 weeks later, on October the 14th, a candidate for the most important battle, the most important event to ever happen, occurred about 10 miles up the road. And on Christmas Day, England crowned a new king, William I, William, Duke of Normandy, William the Bastard, William the Conqueror. Of course, seismic shifts in the world order don't just happen for no reason. So let's rewind and paint the picture. I'll try and keep it simple, but pay attention because it does get a bit Game of Thronesy. January 1066, Edward the Confessor, the King of England, died. Now, as per tradition, the crown is usually passed to the oldest son, but Edward died childless. He was heirless, not hairless, heirless. He had no heir. This sparked a succession crisis whereby several contenders claimed to be the rightful heir to the throne. The strongest bloodline claim was actually Edward's great-nephew, Edgar the Ethelyn, but he was only 15 years old and he just didn't have the support. Nobody wanted the boy who would be king. Go on, Edgar, shoo, shoo. Then we have the Viking King of Norway, Harald Hardrada. England had a string of Danish Viking king rulers from 1016 to 1042. The last of these kings, Harthur Canute, while he was still King of England, named Magnus the Good, the King of Norway, as his successor. But when Harthur Canute died, the kingdom went to his half-brother, Edward the Confessor. Magnus the Good died soon after, but his uncle, Harald Hardrada, always felt that the crown belonged to his family. So when it came up for grabs in 1066, he was ready to pounce. William, Duke of Normandy, who, surprise, surprise, was also a distant cousin of Edward the Confessor, yeah, it appears that they all slept with each other, also had a really good claim to the throne. Edward and William actually knew each other. Edward was protected in exile in Normandy after the Viking conquest in 1016. Edward's mother was a Norman, but then she also married the Viking King Canute in 1017. William claimed that Edward verbally promised him the crown, but he would say that, wouldn't he? And he wouldn't be the last. He also had the backing of the Pope and a lot of other European leaders. Not that it was any of their business. So as you can see, there's a lot of back scratching, potential broken promises, blood is thicker than water, wonky diplomacy, and old scores to be settled. The decision was ultimately made by the Witan. They're like the King's Council, the royal advisors, the apparently wise men of the court. And they chose Harold Godwinson. He was one of their own, a prominent noble, maybe the richest man in the land, the old king's advisor. He also claimed that Edward promised him the crown on his deathbed, but he would say that, wouldn't he? And what do you know? He was also Edward's brother-in-law. Harold Godwinson was quickly crowned King of England. It was a busy day for Westminster Abbey, holding Edward's funeral and Harold's coronation on the same day. So now we have our main cast of characters. What about the action? Who will strike first? Will it be Harald Hardrada from Norway or William of Normandy from Normandy? Actually, it was the new king's estranged brother, Tostig Godwinson. He was in exile in Normandy this whole time, trying to forge an alliance with William, who was actually related to Tostig's wife. Of course he was. In May 1066, he gathered about 60 ships and landed on the Isle of Wight, which is just off the south coast of England, over there. The local forces drove him off, so he sailed along this coast and attempted another landing in Kent, which is way over there. where he met his brother, the king's formidable army. So he just kept on sailing. Around the corner and up the east coast, raiding as he went, Tostig again tried to land, but he was defeated by the Northern Earls, Edwin and Morcar. Would it surprise you to learn that Edwin was now also the king's brother-in-law? Harold married Edwin's sister to strengthen his position in the north around the time of his coronation. Anyway, Tostig survived the defeat, abandoned his army, and fled to Scotland. He then crossed the North Sea, met with King Harald Hardrada in Norway, and made a pact. Together, we can defeat my brother, who is probably also your second cousin at this point, and take the crown. So technically, Tostig is yet another angry man trying to become the King of England, but he never had the support, and he's making contradictory alliances all over the place. But it doesn't really matter. He'll be dead soon. While King Harold and his great army were poised for battle on the south coast, expecting an invasion from Normandy, Harald Hardrada, along with his new friend Tostig, landed about 300 ships, 10,000 Viking warriors on the Yorkshire shore. The Battle of Fulford, just south of York, symbolically the old Viking capital of England, 20th of September, 1066. We can't be there today. It's about 200 miles north of here, but that helps illustrate the time frame and the reasons for what happened next. Without the support of Harold's army, the northern forces of Edwin and Morcar were crushed. The victorious Norwegians once again entered York. Obviously, the King of England has to respond. He marched that army all the way to York in just 5 days, where he met his brother and Harald Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge on the 25th of September. I know it's slightly confusing having a Harold and a Harold intertwined throughout this story, but don't worry, one of them will be dead soon. 'Twas a bloody battle, but the English army eventually almost completely wiped out the Vikings. It's said that of the 300 ships that Harold landed, only 24 were needed to transport the wounded. The two main culprits were killed. Tostig Godwinson, the king's brother, was cut to pieces, and Harald Hardrada, Viking king of Norway, took an arrow to the throat. But just 3 days later, on the 28th of September, we arrive back here, Pevensey Bay in East Sussex. William, Duke of Normandy, had been preparing all summer for this moment. His forces landed on English soil unopposed. The Normans quickly built a wooden castle at Hastings and fortified the beach at Pevensey. Harold, fresh from his victory just a few days before, marched his army south. It wasn't quite the same as the lightning dash that surprised the Vikings at Stamford Bridge. They marched for a week and stopped in London for another week. Then Harold took the fight to William. On the night of October the 13th, as legend has it, the English army camped on a hill about 7 miles from William's castle in Hastings, in what is now the town of Battle. The moment had arrived. William gathered his army and headed to battle. He quite literally headed to battle. The precise details of what exactly happened the next day, the numbers involved, even where it happened, have been argued over by historians since that day. But that's what historians do. And it's been nearly 1,000 years, so the details are going to be a bit foggy. What is agreed is that at 9 a.m. on October the 14th, 1066, the Battle of Hastings kicked off. Although it wasn't in Hastings, it was somewhere nearby. Harold took the high ground with his, let's say, 8,000 men. It is probable that the two armies were roughly the same size. Although the English were almost entirely comprised of infantry, that's men holding shields and swords and spears, while the Normans were about half infantry and a quarter archers
and the other quarter were cavalry. That's right, the Normans transported hundreds of highly trained horses from Normandy on those longboats. The battle lasted all day long, with Harold's shield wall proving very difficult to penetrate. And with the home advantage, so being able to wait till it's dark and then pull back and gather more troops for the next day, the English had the upper hand. So William changed tactics. He used his cavalry to attack the shield wall and then turn around and leg it in a fake retreat. English troops broke the line to chase down the fleeing Normans, leaving weak spots behind for more Norman cavalry to exploit. This worked a treat, causing confusion and changing the nature of the battle, created more targets for the Norman archers and infantry to attack. And then the decisive blow. Harold is killed, maybe famously with an arrow to the eye, but more likely hacked down by a knight. Who can say? The evidence is old and flimsy. It matters little because this was a fight for the crown, and now one of the candidates is out of the picture completely. The English army collapses and William wins the Battle of Hastings. Before we move on to the aftermath, let's have a look at the fabled location. This field in the town of Battle is the generally accepted site of the Battle of Hastings. William had an abbey built on the site with the high altar marking the exact spot where Harold was killed. The guided tour will show you exactly where the armies lined up. You can stand in the marsh at the bottom of the hill and pretend to be a Norman looking up at the Saxon shield wall. However, many historians dispute this precise mapping. No artifacts or remains associated with the battle have ever been found at this site, and the recorded ebb and flow of the fighting that day simply doesn't fit the topography of the land. But what about the great big abbey built on the site where Harold died? Didn't William order its construction? And he was actually there. He should know. One of the theories suggests that the actual site of the Battle of Hastings in a village called Crowhurst, just 3 miles away, was too hilly to build an abbey, so they built it in what would become the town of Battle instead. But here at Crowhurst, there is what many people believe to be the remains of that original abbey. They did build it after all. The other part of the wrong or second abbey theory is that the monks of Battle Abbey were involved in an argument with the Bishop of Chichester over taxation. It's suggested that the monks who wrote the Chronicle of Battle, basically documenting what happened in 1066 about 100 years after the event, greatly exaggerated the association between their abbey and the actual battlefield. Oh look, it says right here that right before the battle, William said that if he won, he would build an abbey on this exact spot. So that makes our abbey tax exempt, right? However, there are documents closer to 1066 that support the site at Battle. There's that 1,000 years of foggy history again. I'm not a qualified historian, I'm not an expert, but I have gone down the rabbit hole, and I really, really like the Crowhurst theory, which, if it's true, makes that piece of building over there, that field, and that hill the most important place in the world. More on that in a minute. So where were we? Wherever it happened, William, Duke of Normandy, did indeed defeat King Harold on October the 14th, 1066. But the remaining nobles were not just going to hand over the crown. Instead, the Witan chose Edgar Ethelyn as their new king. Remember that 15-year-old boy who would be king, the great nephew of Edward the Confessor? Although he was never actually crowned, technically, he got to be the King of England for a few weeks. William marched his army to London. He faced the odd skirmish, He couldn't cross the Thames at London Bridge, so he went the long way round and approached London from the northwest, beating down more pockets of resistance from the city. The nobles eventually surrendered to William in Berkhamsted and accepted him as their king. He was crowned the King of England in Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day 1066. The going wasn't easy at first. There were rebellions in Exeter and other cities in the west and south of England, an uprising in the north, attempted invasions by Harold's son, and the Vikings again, but William squashed them all. As time passed, the strategy of integration instead of decimation paid off. The Normans were playing a long game. Which brings us to that bold statement of this period, that this battle and its aftermath, this king and everything that came along with him, could be the most important thing to ever happen to England and maybe even the entire human race. The Normans introduced the feudal system, a social structure designed to consolidate power. The nobles, the elites, and of course, the royals prospered, while the vast majority of the population worked the land. The focus of English politics turned more towards mainland Europe rather than Scandinavia. The official language of the ruling class was now Anglo-Norman, which, for argument's sake, is Old French. Obviously, it takes a very long time to change an entire country's language, and the rich people in the court are not having many conversations with the poor people in the field. But over time, the tongue we speak today emerged. It's a really interesting mix of Germanic and Romance. Basically, English society had changed forever. Its architecture, its worldview, its religion, its laws, its security. This land and its leaders grew from strength to strength, becoming a formidable global force, the most powerful country in the world, the largest empire the world has ever seen, and establishing the future superpower. Could any of that have occurred without the foundation that was built by the Normans, without the reign of King William, without winning the Battle of Hastings? If you would like to support the work we do here, you can use Buy Me a Coffee, which is an online tipping service. You can visit the merch store and get yourself a t-shirt or something, or you can join our Patreon, where you can watch all of our videos ad-free and a week early. The money will go towards fuel, food, and gloves, because Charlie's hands are absolutely freezing.